Hey, welcome to the Coffee with the Doctors podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris.
I'm Dr. Liesel.
Hey, and we shine a light on the powerful scholarship emerging from Michigan's practitioner scholars working in K-12 schools. Each episode, we sit down with educators, leaders, researchers whose work is shaping classrooms, guiding policy, and transforming communities.
Hey, so grab your coffee or preferred morning beverage, settle in, and join us as we elevate the voices, ideas, and innovations driving Michigan's educational future. Hey, so Chris, what is on the agenda for this week?
So, Lisa, when you have the forefathers, the archetypes, the Dell originators, it really makes figuring out what you're going to talk about kind of difficult, especially when they've worked multiple roles and the state of the state has just happened. So, Lisa, I got to tell you, I really don't necessarily know where we should go with this show. Do you have any ideas?
So, Chris, I think it makes sense to kind of zoom in and zoom out.
Okay.
We are joined today by the OGs, Dr. Dedrick Martin and Dr. Jessica Gillard.
Hey.
They both are in the inaugural class of the Doctorate of Educational Leadership at Michigan State University.
Cool, cool.
They have played a lot of roles in education. Uh, Dr. Martin is currently the superintendent of Kalamazoo-RESA, and Dr. Gillard is currently the CTE, Career and Technical Education Director for Alpena Public Schools. But in the midst, they have done everything from Dedrick has been superintendent for the last 17 years, Ypsilanti, St. John's, Caledonia. And Jessie's played roles from birth and preschool up until post-secondary. She's been a national policy advocate. These two come with some serious credentials. So
So
I think
way to shorten those bios
those
because
bios,
that could be a podcast in and of itself.
I think I could do some good summarizing. But anyway, we wanted to, at the core of our podcast, is really elevating the thinking that we learned in the Doctorate of Educational Leadership, as well as the dissertation in practice, which originally was called a capstone project. So we wanted to start there, and then we'll probably zoom out a little bit. So we'd love for you guys to talk about that research that you did and publish it 10 years ago now.
Wow.
So you did an equity analysis in 2015. We'd love to hear about kind of what were some of your reflections on that?
I'll start by saying two things. One, when you say the OGs of the DEL, it can't be understated that uh, we refer to her as Dr. G. So she really put the G in OG. So I'm just saying. Um, and actually coming about this idea of doing the equity analysis, she really came up with the idea of it, and it really resonated with me from the work I was doing at the time, and maybe more importantly, the previous work I had done prior to starting the program. I worked in a district in another state where we were under a federal consent decree, and that, for those who don't know, um, there was an OCR that was filed against the district on one charge, and the district was essentially non-responsive. And so that OCR grew to 11 different charges, and the federal government stepped in and put the district under a federal court order to desegregate schools and improve the outcomes for African American students. So when she came with that idea of, you know what, we should do an equity analysis or an equity audit, I was like, hey, right up my alley, because, it's those who've been through this program, you get to that point where you're really trying to figure out what you want to focus your research on. So I'll give credit to the real OG, Dr. G. on bringing that idea to the forefront.
Well, I appreciate that. I wish I would have came up with it, right? In the academic world, equity audits exist as a construct for districts to and any entity to look at how different subgroups are doing compared to their percentage in the general population of the school. So you're looking more at underrepresentation and overrepresentation. I was fascinated by this, having only worked in schools where it was clear to me some kids were getting the short end of the stick while others were not. I was just fascinated by this idea that there was an organized and evidence-based methodology for looking at all these different pieces, and not just student achievement, looking at programmatic participation, who's in AP classes, who's not, who's in special education, who's not, like really looking at it systemically, item by item, on positive outcomes as well as negative outcomes. Who was showing up and which subgroups were showing up was fascinating to me. So Dedrick and I went down this road, not only knowing a little, and the more we unearthed and the more we unpacked, I can only say that there were points in time that like I just sat at my computer and stared at the data in disbelief because it was so clear, the patterns that were emerging as we conducted the analysis.
You know, I think something that stood out to me when I had read it, and you had shared it with me years ago, that you looked at two pieces of data that I think are really powerful. Some of the instructional practices data, and then also some student voice data. What were some of the reflections that you had about those data types, and why would it be important for any organization to really look at that?
For me, I led the meeting with students to gather that student voice. And I think prior to this, the research and the data was always fascinating, but even with the previous experiences, that was the first time that I really had an opportunity to kind of contextualize it through the voices of the kids who are experiencing it. So you can look at the data, you can run wild with your emotions, your thoughts behind it. But then hearing the kids bring light to some issues that I thought were concerning, or in some cases, hearing them maybe not as aware as how challenging the issues were that they were facing. So just really bringing that home through gathering student voice, I think makes the data come alive. And I think it's hard not to, as an educator, not to be more moved or more motivated to do something about it. When you're actually talking to and staring in the face and listening and hearing the voices of the people who are actually a living representation of what that data is in real time. So that, because I really wanted to do this from a quantitative lens, and not necessarily a mixed methodology lens on the first side of it. But I'm so glad that we incorporated that because it just further cemented and grounded me into the work that I had done in the past, and more importantly, the work moving forward in the future.
Yeah, I would reiterate that we had the gift of our advisor being Dr. Tara Vincent Chambers, who really pushed us. I mean, we were busy professionals, like cranking through the data, getting our findings, and she's like, "You need to talk to kids. You have to do this." And it's not that we didn't want to, but logistically, Like there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. There's a lot of planning that has to happen. You've got to come out of work to do it, to do all those things. And we pushed against it a little bit. We were like, we're good. We got this. We're good. And she's like, no, you really need to talk to kids. And what a gift. I mean, first of all, any opportunity you have to talk to students in the context of research that you're doing is incredible. But to hear students articulate the inequities that we saw on paper that they knew full well, many of them, that they were living in the midst of, right? And to be able to use their direct quotes and have them engaged and share the data with them that was about them was one of, I think, the best, to use the word gift again, gifts that we were given during this process, and making that connection. So yeah, it just made the whole process that much richer.
Yeah, and shout out to the district for allowing us to do that. I know as a superintendent, you can look at this stuff, but no one wants to air their dirty laundry or let some other place look at it. But for them to be open to that in the name of like really understanding what's going on and trying to find ways to get better. Yeah, it was just a gift. I think it enriched the entire. I think it enriched the work all the way around just by going through that.
Yeah. Um, Lisa, slow me down if I'm jumping some steps here. But one of the things we always talk about, especially as it pertains to anything around culturally responsive practices and research around that kind of thing, is the framework portions, the lit review portions, the analysis of the particular inequities tend to be the most robust portions of the papers. Then you turn towards where we want to feast off of as practitioners, the recommendation portion. And that's the skinniest portion. What strikes me with you guys is in your careers, you guys actually live in the actualizing recommendations portion. So, given that you guys did research around student voice and inequities, how have you guys operationalized your recommendations that you've made? And what if any insights do you have for other like actual practitioners trying to go about addressing inequities with students and students of color?
So maybe ironically, maybe not, I'm not sure, but I've spent the last week looking at subgroup data for underrepresentation and overrepresentation in a career and technical education standpoint, because we're in the process of applying for new CTE 61V funding, which is based on an entire gap analysis process that came out of the Department of Education. So I consider that to be, not that we were personally responsible for that, but I consider that to be a win for all of us, because that means it's made it, looking at data in that way has made it to a space and a place that is forcing the hands of others to look at the data that way, right? And so it has been interesting and a little bit ironic to be like, here I am 10 years later looking at underrepresentation and overrepresentation and figuring out what to do about it. Because in the grant application, you have to say, like, so what, now what are you going to do about it? Here's your data. What strategies are you going to put in place? How are you going to know if those strategies are effective? How are you going to build that into your evaluation of your overall programming? And I wish that was happening everywhere. We know it's not. But in this small slice of the world, for the entire state of Michigan to have to do that process in order to access funds, I think is a game changer. The trick is still where the rubber meets the road. What are you going to do and how are you going to know if it's working? And I think that's what we realized is so difficult. It's not that you can't overcome that, but you have to have systematic data analysis processes in place, which isn't always the case. You have to have some sort of access to know what are the evidence-based practices that are moving the needle in any of these areas. Now, unfortunately, because of the toxic political climate that we live in, you have to make sure which words you're using are not turning off an entire segment of your constituency groups and decision makers, right? So there's all these things swirling around that make it challenging. But the fact that it's being baked into the cake in terms of funding distribution, I think is really a positive sign.
For myself, I think this is just a way of being. I can't, I can think of 4 examples that literally in the last 2 weeks, in the last couple of years. So I've used this lens as it pertains to our staffing, and trying to identify, and lift to others this wide disparate, this wide gap between the kids we serve, and the staff that we have, and not that it's going to be a perfect blend, but what I've lifted is, and what I've been trying to actually attack through policy changes, is the effort to go beyond the traditional standard norms so that we can try to strive towards creating a staff that is more reflective of the student population that we serve, because representation matters. And so trying to take that to the policy level, and right now I have a board who's very appreciative of that. Even though we're in these challenging times, we got smart in how we talk about and frame things, because we know that there's this active resistance. Right now, we open up a new CTE program, and so proactively looking at the data on the front end. This is the first year we were opening this new center, reaching out to some of the superintendents, and one in particular, and just kind of sharing thoughts around the data and what we could do on the front end to make sure there's greater representation. And we saw almost a threefold increase in minority students accessing what we believe to be high quality programs that's going to lead to well-paying careers, with articulated credit and dual credit enrollment. And more importantly, the staff and the administrative team also recognizing the need to put in supports for these kids on the front end to make sure not only we get them there, but we get them through in a successful way. I was just having a conversation Thursday with my staff about the overrepresentation of kids in special ed. And so it started out last year as a conversation, and hey, presenting the data and what we're going to do. And so we actually, and I actually pulled some old stuff from past work. And we'll probably be looking at our research, because what the conversation ended on with Thursday is, okay, we need to help this district take the next step. And the next step is putting in some what we believe are best practices to mitigate some of this. And we did a small sliver of it 2 years ago when I took this assignment at KRESA. And we put work with the district, put a few things in place, and we saw some really good results. So the first thing we wanted to do is gain trust, because when you're talking about inequities, and especially in this climate, it can get really touchy, right? And so we had to start with something small and give people some, a sense of victory or a win. That we could tie to tangible results and tie to kids. Seeing that, I think the door is more open. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks when we go back to meet with this district and saying, hey, now it's time to ramp it up. And trust and believe. We have a whole laundry list of things that we feel like we want to recommend to get that, but trying to get that buy-in. So I think what I'm trying to say in this long-winded conversation is that for me, every time I go into a situation, I am looking through an equity audit lens and I'm looking at that data. And then I realize that I have to find a way to humanize or contextualize the story because sometimes for some people, just looking at the data, when you talk about changes or best practices, what they really hear is you're saying something is wrong with me. You're saying something is wrong with how I did something. Instead of looking at this as, wow, what we're doing is not having the impact we thought on them. It's having maybe not as much success on what we would like to see, and how do we reframe this conversation? So I think the part that is really challenging right now, I appreciate the financial changes because it's starting to in some ways bring light or bake it into the cake that we need to look at this. But the professional development side is the challenging side because you can't call things, you got to be careful what you name it right now. So there's still a huge mismatch in the system. So we fought for years before we could openly talk about DEI and we need to embrace these challenges, but we didn't necessarily have the resources or the funding directed towards this. So when you're trying to do this, you have parts of your organization feeling like, well, in order to help the kids who are struggling, you're stealing from me. Now the funding is there, so people can't really lean on that argument as much because there's a recognition through the funding that there are inequities and we need to address it. But now we have the professional development side, so you can't really talk about it as openly with the PD. So in my view, we still have these challenges, but um, bringing it to what Chris was saying, the real side of getting to the meat and the putting the recommendations in action. I think it's a combination of making sure that you have the resources or carve out a way to focus some of the resources where it needs to go, making sure that you have the professional development and the support in place, the support for the students and the teachers if needed, the professional development so that you can show people a better way, whether it's instructional practices or procedures that we're doing. I think a piece that people underlook is the policies and the practices. Those are the gatekeepers that keeps kids out of programs that we want them in to bring down over the underrepresentation or the practices and the policies that seem to manifest in over identifying kids in a negative way. But addressing the policy, the practices, and putting that into a systematic form with the data, with the funding, and with the professional development. I think we're touching on pieces of it, but rarely do we see people put all five together in a comprehensive way. So I think that's why we still have so much work to do. Um, but it's work that if you've immersed yourself in the data, you've spent time with the kids, how could you not feel empowered or compelled to move forward with this work? So for me, it's a way of being. I really can't see it too many other ways.
I think
Yeah,
that's so
go ahead.
powerful. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that was one of the pieces that I think in retrospect, we didn't realize how powerful the hearts and minds piece was going to be. We had a advisory group of folks from within the school district, and we were taking them along for the ride the whole way, kind of deciding like what data we're going to look at, what indicators are most important, where can we get that data. And that really helped them feel like they were in the passenger seats, at least with us along the way, which I think reduced a little bit of that, like, wait a second, like now you're shining the light on me, maybe a little bit. But when the data starts to show that like this isn't some like outside, yes, there's some outside variables, but that the cause coming from within the building, then people get a little itchy, right? Because it's like, well, wait a second, we are overrepresenting, instead of focusing on attendance in the early years and high quality preschool experiences, and interventions that could change a child's trajectory before they're in third grade. Instead, we have overrepresentation in special education of certain subgroups, right? Well, that's a systems problem. That's not something that came to you. That's something that you created, right? Not intentionally, but just by the sheer fact that you have a special education system set up and you don't have an early childhood system set up and you don't have attendance system set up, right? Also, like we were really unique in that the district we worked with had a lot of data on teacher quality and the quality of instruction happening in the classroom. So we could actually analyze by the percentage of didactic instruction happening. Well, shockingly, or not so shockingly, right? Our boys, our students of color who were also male students, had a higher percentage of time that they spent in front of lower quality teachers with a higher percentage of didactic instruction, right? They also had a higher percentage of special education referrals and identification. Like all of those things matter. And those are not things that are happening outside of the school district. Those are all things within your control and within your purview. So then you have to either say, oh, okay, and set it aside, or you have to roll up your sleeves, right? And so those are decisions that get made, and that we know we all work in school districts. Like some things get prioritized and some things don't, and that's just how things work. So we had a robust set of recommendations that were put forward that no district could possibly have implemented all at once. Mm-hmm. So you have to pick which things seem most contextually relevant and possible at the time and move forward, and then reevaluate, and then try to do something on one of the other strategies and move forward and evaluate. But the level of opportunity gap that we identified is not something that would have been structurally fixable within even a decade. It wasn't created in a decade, and it wouldn't have been fixable in a decade. Would you agree with that, Dedrick?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's maybe the part that is a little disheartening and daunting, but it's real. This level of work takes time. It really takes time. It takes consistency, and you are completely right, Jessica. It didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to disappear overnight. But staying true to it, you can get there. And so, as I gave some examples earlier, I talk about trying to focus on things, small wins, because you got to build that within the culture of the community that you're working in. If you bring them this robust list of things to do, and you haven't earned that trust, you haven't maybe got some small wins or things that they can contextualize and is tangible and they feel like they can do, you can forget the list. They'll never want to start going any further. So.
Dr. Carlson, I don't want to jump ahead of you. I'm recognizing that you haven't asked the question in a little bit, but I just have one burning question that I want to throw in there. Just real quick, Dr. Carlson, and then you can have the mic for the rest of the show. Many of us have kind of had experiences where we've participated in equity audits or received data from equity audits. And one of the great revealings is that you um, just get to see the end product of what your systems are doing. But if you're in school, is one of the things that you start to feel, and especially if you're like a student of history, where you've, uh, when you talk about Brown v. Board, hey, in order to upend this system of inequity, we needed the Supreme Court to come in with these overarching, wide angle policies and make sweeping changes. But oftentimes in these equity audits, they are everyday practices, and the same is true of you guys' findings, everyday practices happening in classrooms. And in which case, that for an educator can feel like, so we're the problem? And Dr. Gillard, you mentioned something about hearts and minds. I'm wondering from you guys' perspectives as educational leaders, how do you people the right way? It's one thing for the leader to have an equity mindset when approaching the things, but you don't enter Caledonia with everybody, maybe presumably having that same mindset. I've been in a district where sometimes we just use that language of coach them up or coach them out. Um, how do you go about finding that right balance of peopling? Because many of the systems or the functions of the system or parts of the system are people. And how do you go about changing hearts and minds, creating systems where you can create consistent mindsets around producing more equitable outcomes? Big question. So I'm sure, Dr. Carlson, I've almost silenced you for the rest of the pod. There's no chance.
It's the $1 million question, right? Because depending on what district you're in and how much resources are allocated towards creating spaces for people to learn and dialogue and generate knowledge together is, to me, like the critical piece. Right now, if I'm lucky, I get an hour in a month with my teachers. An hour in a month. And in that hour, I have to do some other things that aren't about changing hearts and minds, right? Some brass tacks type things. And so that has been very interesting to me, having worked in different parts of education and different how little we prioritize that space where actual dialogue and shared learning can happen. And some places that we've been, Dedrick and I have even been together in St. John's, really prioritize that, had it built into their contracts, had it built into how teachers were compensated. Like there was a lot of time and space for doing that. And in other places, there's very minimal. And so that to me is one of the pieces that I don't know how we go about doing what needs to get done if there isn't time for people to bring their whole selves together to learn and to share and to dialogue and to generate new information together to move forward. We know that one of the highest impacts we know from Marzano is the sense of collective efficacy. And if you have no time to actually build a sense of collective efficacy in a certain direction, like that, just you don't just snap your fingers and have that happen. So I know it's a strange maybe way to answer that question, but to me that is the secret sauce that we are not investing enough time and energy into in most school districts.
From my perspective, I agree with everything she said, and I want to add a little bit to it. So, and you mentioned Caledonia, and so that one comes to mind as maybe a point of pride. Over time, I had to evolve in my thinking on not only equity, but how to address it. And I think early in my career, I was kind of like, get on this train or get step off or get pushed off, coach them up, coach them out. at some point I realized that you can't hire or fire your way to success in a system that's already going. And so I had to kind of evolve and maybe take some would maybe say a pie in the sky, overly optimistic, or even a naive approach. And, I like, okay, everybody came into education, or probably 90% of the people came into education with the idea that they want to make a difference in kids' lives and they want to be better. The reality is when you put them in there, whether it's classroom management, whether it's working with kids from a different culture that maybe they don't understand, they may not always have the tools to experience the success. So you can read about it, you can hear about it, but until you actually get your hands in there, it's difficult. And so taking that, I try to find ways to where can I connect with them so when we're having the conversation, it's not about what you did wrong or try to lead it where it doesn't come across as what you did wrong, but how do we collectively um, change this? Because if what we're doing is not giving us the success that we all hope to get, then might we want to do something different? And I know it gets really touchy there, but when I stepped into Caledonia, and this has maybe helped bring it all together. Um, this was already a academic system that was, in many eyes, highly regarded and doing well. Well, one of the first things I did is I had all the data pulled together, and I showed them their data, but I showed them their data as it reflects to other school systems that were similarly positioned as them in terms of the outcomes in the student population. And I showed them that we weren't performing as well as we thought we were. Um, and so, what it really got to is their pride in terms of, hey, we're really good, and you're trying to tell us that we're not good. And I'm like, yeah, and we need to go from good to great. So, how do we have that conversation? Well, they didn't really know what was coming. But also looking at the data and digging deeper, we didn't have a really large number of kids who were considered at risk, free, or reduced lunch. But for those that we did, guess what? It included pretty much the majority of the minorities that was in the district, if not all of them. And it included a lot of white students who were just low income. Um, and for a pretty much all white staff, there was this connection that a lot of them could identify with, whether it was, you know, I worked my way up here, but I started out from humble beginnings and struggled. So maybe I can identify or think a little differently. And so we really kind of attacked that, and then we started not only with the data, but we had to work on our internal data structure, and that was kind of a eye opener for them because they just waited till the state gave us the data, and it was pretty much, well, we're beating our surrounding schools, so we're great. And I remember at the time saying, we're in the top five. I don't see why we are not number, based on what I'm looking at. I don't see why we're not in the top three or maybe even top two. We need to strive. And people were kind of looking at me like, this guy's lost his mind. Where did we get him from? Um, when we started to put together the data systems, we started to consistently look at it. We started to consistently talk about it. At that time, it was just before things were going crazy. So we had some PD around this and instructional practices. Um, and we were taking a collective effort of how do we work together across the system? What are we seeing that's working for us? What is not working for us? When we started putting all of these pieces together, we started to experience some success. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we did well, but in 5 years, having two schools, and ironically, when you look at the two schools, they were our schools that had more of our struggling population that end up getting a national blue ribbon. Um, and we also saw growth even through COVID every year. What I think a lot of people didn't really pay attention to is I was intentionally talking about we need to have more of our kids experience success, and if we can hone in on our free and reduced lunch count and our at-risk population. And I didn't go anything into race, but anybody who paid attention could figure it out. They started to buy in, and then they started to buy into how do we get better. And it wasn't about the racial component, what they could accept, um, and by and large, is it was about our kids who hit this marker of free and reduced lunch. It really didn't. Now, there were some who could see like this is clear, and some who wanted to be more overt, like let's have conversations about culture and race, and conversations about this, and conversations about that. And I was like, I could have started down that, but I was like, this community collectively as a whole was not ready for that level of conversation. It was really just going to bring up the pitchforks and the fighting. So I had to take them to from where they were and grow them to a more robust conversation. But at the same time, we were tackling the policies. We were tackling the practices, more important, around pulling the data, looking at the data, what type of data, the conversations we're having about the data. We were tackling the practices around the instruction, and making sure we were aligning instruction within the building and across the district, which was kind of a big issue for them. Um, and it was the consistency. So my last year there, I remember one of my senior central office staff. We were sitting in our welcome back to the district, and they knew every year I'm coming in and I'm talking about the data. And the staff member afterwards said, as soon as you brought up the data, you could hear one of the high school members just groan, like, oh, here he goes with the data again. Because that was like the final frontier. They were not moving. Fortunately, they did have a little bit of growth that year, but like all of the other buildings, all 7 other buildings was starting to experience that momentum. Um, and because we were consistent looking at the data, because we kept pushing on the structure, vertical alignment across the district, because we were infusing the professional development, we had worked really hard with the contract, talking about another practice. Um, we were actually pushing in the contract to get more days for professional development and spread it out in a way that we felt we could have a more consistent flow of getting to instructional practices with professional development and then support going along. We were attacking it from multiple levels, and I was trying to be very strategic about the funding because I set up the narrative around our at-risk students. And so we need to make sure that we protect the funding and the supports there. We were starting to get some synergy. COVID hit, and it rocked everybody a little bit, but it didn't take us completely off our game. Um, because I think we were trying to weave all of those things together. And so, but I really think when I look at it, it was because I, as a leader, had to evolve myself and just say, maybe on the spectrum of culture and climate and dealing with issues of inequity, maybe I feel like I'm over here. But if the majority of my staff is here, I can't start at a level 8 trying to get to 10 when my staff might be at a level 1, 2, or 3. I need to go there, and I need to move them up as fast as I can, as systematic as I can, um, and as non-confrontational as I can, because as the leader, you cannot be in all classes and all buildings at all times. You cannot just wave a magic wand and hire all the staff that you want if the system already exists. If you're starting brand new, then yeah, you got a golden opportunity. But if the system is already there, you have people, you have culture, you have beliefs, and you have practices and policies and procedures and systems that have been put in place and existed long before you got there. And whether they were working or not, they were working for the adults. And that's why they're going to be hard to change, these policies, these practices, systems. And so you got to work on changing the hearts and mind as well as the structure. But you got to figure out where the hearts and minds are, and then be careful and strategic about which structures and practices and policies you need to go after. Because if you go faster than the group is ready to go, you're not going to go to your level 8, 9, 10, and beyond. You're actually going to probably go backwards because you're going to be spending more time in active resistance. And that took years of trial and error for me to get to that point. But I think I'm getting closer to where I want to be as a leader. And it's also kind of funny because people look at my past life, if you will, and they think like, oh, he's going to come in and he's going to say this and he's going to do this, and we're getting ready to get into the fight. And I'm like, yeah, I've tried a lot of that, and it doesn't get you the results that you think, or you work so hard, and as soon as you leave, they work just as hard to go back the opposite way because they're upset because you did it out of force and not bringing the hearts and minds along. So sorry I'm so long-winded, but
No, now you see why this man has had such an influence and an impact on me as a professional and personally, because I miss your wisdom and your diplomacy, buddy. That was beautiful.
thank you.
I so appreciate. I know when we were kind of planning this episode, and I said, you know what, we just need to let them be able to talk, right? Like they will lead and carry all of this. This is all about your reflections, and I just so appreciate the insights and reflective nature you both have had. And I think about kind of for our final question, we like to talk about the big E in equity as being all the systems, the procedures, the processes, you talked about teacher contracts, and then the little E being the like hearts, minds, and interactions. So we've talked a lot about the adults and the systems. When we can get that alignment, when we have that coherence, what would classrooms, what would interactions look like for kids if we could take all that we've talked about in this conversation, and really line it up, paint that picture of what it would look like?
Despite all of the data crunching and all of the research and all of the effect sizes, what I always come back to is what Sharon, is it Ritchie, Lisa? I'm
Yep.
losing. Yeah, Sharon
Yep.
Ritchie.
Dr. Sharon Ritchie.
Dr. Sharon Ritchie refers to as the universal needs, which is self-determination theory, right? Do students have a sense of belonging? Do students have a sense of connectedness or relatedness with others? And are we building student sense of competency and connection and choice? And the choice being, are they able to advocate for themselves, choose things within their environment? You can put that in a kindergarten classroom, that approach to meeting universal needs. You can put that in top 5 organization or company, and it's going to be the same, because that's how people learn. That's how people get better at what they're doing. So whether you're talking about the teachers or the students, those universal needs are the baseline foundation. And if you don't have autonomy, competence, and relatedness, again, baked into the cake, you're really not going to get very far. And that has nothing to do with any of those other indicators that we've talked about. It is the core of how people learn.
I think I don't know if I have much more to add to it. I think for me, um, it's everything that we've talked about, everything that Jessica said, but I kind of look at it as like maybe a big five, that that data, that ability to tell the story, but to connect it to the hearts and minds. I think, doing that through PD. I think the funding and the resources and the supports, it's critical. Like you can have high expectations, you can put kids in certain places, good or bad. But if you don't have the resources or the supports that they need, you're really just setting them up for failure or more, the data is going to play out the way the data play out. Um, Staffing, that one took me a while to like wrap my mind around. But years ago, I read a book somewhere, and it was a gentleman had prided himself on he had only um, uh, removed one staff member in his career, and it wasn't in education. And they really believed that if they poured into people, um, that they would get what they want. And if they didn't do their job well enough, the people wouldn't be successful. So they took that one person they had to fire as it was their fault. I don't know if I'm at that point, but it made me start thinking about, you can't fire your way to, this ideal group of people, right? So being able to work on the systems, even when you think of like the state and grow your own, like how do we start thinking about making sure that if we are encouraging people to become teachers, we start working on that pipeline early and who gets into those programs and, you know, all of these things, all of these things matter. You can do any one of them and you'll have a modicum of success if you focus. But until you can put all of these things together in a comprehensive way over time and maintain it consistently, you're not going to see the outcomes that we all strive for. So no matter which, focus of the equity lens you want to go after, to truly get to the level of having an impact on the outcomes for the kids that we aspire to have, then you got to address them all. And so to go to the first part of your question, what does the classrooms look like? Classrooms look like they are racially diverse. The staff look like it's going to be diverse. And it also is the culture in the classroom is one where no matter what's going on with the kids, race, gender, um, everybody feels like there's a sense of belonging. Everybody feels connected, that there's someone within the classroom, within the building, within the system who I can trust to be there for me, who I can talk to. There is somewhere that I can get the supports and the help that I need and not be looked down upon. Um, you know, all of these things come together and I think the natural byproduct is people are going to be more invested into working collaboratively as a group. People are going to be more invested in looking at the data and not as what's wrong with me, but ooh, our kids are not getting where we want them to be. How do we change that together? And notice I said we, not I. Because when the teachers think is you're pointing the finger at me like I'm the problem, that's the first problem. So when they start looking at the data as a group, collective efficacy kicks in, and it's like, ooh, well, we're not getting where we think we can be. We know these kids, we care about these kids. What do we need to do different? Let's look at this. And the numbers tell a different story, and it's not about success or failure. It's about there's something wrong with the things that we have in place. What do we tweak? What knob do we adjust here for this group of kids? What knobs do we adjust there? And it becomes this organic living thing, but it has to have founding in the data. It has to have the funding, the resources, the supports. It has to have a representative community. It has to have policies and procedures and practices that support and doesn't become gatekeepers. And it has to have professional development and support for staffing that gets to the hearts and minds and help these people grow to where you want them to be if they're going to help the kids grow. And at that point, now we're talking about treating everybody with kindness, dignity, and respect. So at that point, the gender identity is not an issue. The racial makeup is not an issue. It is really about human connections because no matter where you are, I might not agree with you, but you know the foundation is I'm going to treat you with kindness, dignity, and respect. And I'm going to care about what happens to you. And we're going to start from there. And then I think you can cut through some of the other stuff and move them wherever they are in the organization to a higher level.
So, Chris, if I was an emoji right now, I'd be the one with like the head blowing.
Yeah, you guys delivered. We appreciate it.
Drop the mic. What a pleasure this morning. Like we could sit here all day and listen to you and talk about kind of our reflections on the systems and the people. So appreciate your time today.
We'll just say, like Big Gretch, Dr. J, Doc Martin, out.
Nothing
Yeah.
like getting you up and out early in the morning on a Saturday.
Hey, look, Dr. Carlson, we usually end with asking our guests what their favorite book is. But I got to be honest, I've been taking transcriptions of this whole pod. So I think I have that book, um, be publishing it under the pseudonym, um, Doc Martin and Doc G. Yeah, guys. Well, I guess in keeping with the tradition, we'll end on that question. We are scholar practitioners, and um, uh, it strikes me that you guys didn't get this smart just by watching TV or scrolling through Instagram. So that is, we'll end with one question. What are you guys reading, and where can we find it?
Well, I can't say that I've finished this yet, but I'm very intrigued by it, and I think you guys already clearly understand my hoodoo voodoo kind of way of going through the universe. But I've been reading a book called Love as a Business Strategy,
Ooh.
um, and it really just kind of has turned some things on upside down for me because we separate this construct of love as being something that's like unprofessional or outside of how we operate at school or at work versus at home. And it's been really, really an interesting read.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, for me, I need to go grab the book because I cannot remember the name of the book that I'm reading right now, which is sad. I guess I'm going on a blank. Oh, I had my lovely wife go and get it. Meeting the Moment, A Call for Courage. And so it's by Dr. Debbie McFallone. And it's really an administrative book, just in terms of dealing with the difficult issues that we face as educational leaders, more so with us and our staff, and how do we lead through those difficult moments. And so we are kind of doing a book study on it. And as you can see, I got several tabs on it. So Meeting the Moment, I'm like three-fourths through it. Meeting the
I feel
Moment, A
like you could
Call
write
for
that
Courage.
book, boss. I feel like you could write that book.
Honestly, I think when I retire, I've been flirting with the idea. My wife has been pushing me. She was like, you need to start a podcast or you need to write a book or something. So that was the other thing. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll try and see what this thing is like. Um, but I don't know if I have the time while I'm in the moment. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's so the work becomes the work, and it's like, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it. So I don't know. I probably need Dr. J pushing me like she did in the DEL to keep moving.
I'll be first in line on the pre-order, so let's go.
You know that partner that keeps nudging and showing up, right? We kind of joke about our postdoctoral work. The fact that we have the podcast start at 7 a.m., right? It's the little spaces of time we can carve out before kids are awake or there's activities starting. So, yeah, appreciate you guys. This has been great.
Thanks,
Thank
you
you for
guys.
having us.
So fun. You've blown some cobwebs out of my brain as well. And just any opportunity I have to reconnect with Dedrick or Liesel and interact with you, Chris. We haven't had any sort of previous interactions. It's really been a blessing. So thank you all.
And I appreciate, I'm up on a Saturday morning. I'm just not really thinking at this level on a Saturday morning. So I appreciate
I'm not up on a Saturday morning. Let's be clear.
So I appreciate doing that. I should be productive today now.
That's it.
That's right. Get the morning started off right.
All right, friends. Hey, well, thank you for joining us on Coffee with the Doctors, where practitioner scholars help us rethink what education can be. We'll see you next time for another conversation at the intersection of research, leadership, and practice. Goodbye.